Hey everybody, this is Scott Graham, Extension Entomologist with Auburn University in the Alabama Cooperative Extension System. And today I'm just kind of going to introduce Dr. Towles, Extension Entomologist from the LSU Ag Center, who will be talking about red-banded stink bugs in soybeans. Now, this is a very serious pest, as Dr. Towles will talk about later, getting into control and identification and things like that. But it's something that I think is important that we start thinking about, as we've had back-to-back and the prediction of another mild winter. This pest is going to continue to develop and be a, a threat for our soybeans. We found it overwintering around Prattville this year. Got a lot of calls from the Black Belt area, kind of that I-20 corridor in the western part of the state. And really we found it from around Chilton County to Lee and Otauga County, all the way down to the Gulf and then to the border with Mississippi. So this is something we just need to start thinking about. You know, a lot of times maybe we're budgeting 1, maybe 2 insecticide applications in our soybeans. Well, for this pest, it may require that many or more. It can infest beans prior to potting around the R3.5 growth stage. We had some soybeans on the research station in Prattville that got infested and they never left. So Dr. Towles will talk about this, but we really want to make sure we're looking at our earliest planted soybean fields and our latest planted soybean fields, because as long as we have these kind of mild winters, this pest is probably going to hang around. So we really need to hope and pray for a good freezing hard winter this winter and try to kill these things back. But thank you for watching, and please enjoy the video of Dr. Towles. If you have any questions or comments, don't ever hesitate to reach out and give us a call. Thank you.
My name is Tyler Towles. I'm an extension and research entomologist with the LSU Ag Center down in Winsboro. And today I'll be talking about red-banded stink bug and the effect that it has on Louisiana soybean. Typically we deal with 3 species in Louisiana soybeans, and this is our native species. This is the green, the southern green, and the brown stink bug. But recently, within the past 20 years, we've seen another species come in known as the red-banded stink bug, and has since showed up and established a foothold in the state. It has become the most significant insect pest in Louisiana soybeans. Typically, we see this insect pest in every soybean growing parish in Louisiana, and it can commonly be misidentified as the red-shouldered stink bug and vice versa. But there are some differences that you can tell between these 2 species. The red-banded stink bug is typically a more glossy appearance, whereas the red-shouldered stink bug is more drab and flat. They both tend to have a red band across the back. However, the red-banded stink bug's band can be orange or purple or red or totally just brown and misidentifiable. The main key identifier between these 2 species is the spine arising between the 3rd set of legs in the red-banded stink bug. The red-shouldered stink bug does not have this spine, so if you're seeing that spine, you can be confident with that identification. So we know that this species is a lot more significant than our native species, and the reason for that is that they tend to be more aggressive feeders. They feed deeper into the seed, and their salivary enzymes are much more damaging than our native species are. They can definitely and significantly affect your seed quality, more so than yield, depending on what time they enter the field and what stage of growth the soybean is in. And another reason for the significance of this pest is that this pest feeds much longer into the soybean growth stages than our native species do. It's not uncommon to see them feeding up until R7. So Dr. Jeff Davis out of Baton Rouge did a study where he had 0 stink bugs for 3 weeks, sub-threshold of stink bugs for 3 weeks, above threshold for 3 weeks, and 3 times threshold for 3 weeks. So you can see the effect that the amount of stink bugs in the field can have on your seed quality by looking at these pictures. So in Louisiana, our action thresholds for our native species, our green, our southern green, and our brown, is 36 stink bugs per 100 sweeps. But since the red-banded stink bug is such a significant pest, that threshold is 16 per 100 sweeps. One thing about insecticide terminations, we typically recommend terminating insecticides at R6.5 for our native species. However, for our red-banded stink bugs, we don't typically recommend that you terminate insecticide applications at R6.5. We really don't recommend you terminate them until you are harvesting the beans or until you are a few days out from harvesting the beans. One thing to keep in mind when deciding to terminate insecticides for this insect pest is that you want to keep weather and harvestability in mind. If you're sitting at sub-threshold and you've got rain moving in, you probably want to go ahead and make that insecticide application, and vice versa. If you're a few days out from harvest and you're running threshold, you might be able to get away with that. So one thing that we have on our side for control of red-banded stink bug is temperature. Since this pest is neotropical, it's arising from South America, and it can't withstand freezing temperatures as long as our native species can. Following a harsh winter with freezing temperatures, parts of the Mid-South may not see red-banded stink bugs at all or late into the growing season. However, since we've had consecutive mild winters in the past few years, we've been seeing red-banded stink bugs overwinter as far north as Arkansas and north central Mississippi. Regardless of the winter temperatures, Louisiana tends to see them annually, and this is because they can overwinter in the southern part of the state. So Dr. Jeff Davis did some work looking at temperature effects on red-banded stink bugs, and what he found was that 4 hours at 23 degrees Fahrenheit only killed 50% of the population, whereas 7 hours at 23 degrees Fahrenheit only killed 90% of the population. He also looked at 32 degrees right at freezing, and it took a week to kill 95% of the population. However, keep in mind that overwintering sites for this pest do not always reach freezing point just because the air temperature reaches freezing point. Typically they overwinter in tree lines and leaf litter, and they are shielded from the cold temperatures. So one of the most important things we can do to mitigate damage from this pest is plant our soybeans as early as possible. When the landscape is full of soybeans, it tends to disperse these populations out into the many acres of soybeans that are planted. As our early soybeans are harvested, these red-banded stink bugs will tend to funnel into these later planted soybeans, which can lead to quick infestation of significant damaging populations in our late planted soybeans. In some of our lated planted soybeans on the Macon Ridge Station in Winsboro, we were catching anywhere from 40 to 50 red-banded stink bugs per 15 sweeps. So as we move into control methods, again, the most important thing you can do to mitigate damage from this pest is plant your soybeans as early as you can. The earlier that you plant your soybeans, the less that you'll be treating for this pest. Now, if you do not get your soybeans planted early and you run into damaging populations, what you can do to control these populations are you can go out with a pyrethroid coupled with an organophosphate. And what we typically recommend in Louisiana is bifenthrin plus acephate, which tends to be one of our best applications and has great residual. Another option is lambda-cyhalothrin plus an organophosphate such as acephate. Another route that you could take is a pyrethroid plus a neonicotinoid such as bifenthrin plus clothianidin, beta-cyfluthrin plus imidacloprid, and lambda-cyhalothrin plus imidacloprid. One thing we do not recommend is applying acephate as a standalone product because it can have inconsistent results. One thing also to keep in mind is that insecticides have little effect on red-banded stink bug eggs. So if you're scouting and you've got a significant amount of eggs in the field, what you want to do is let them hatch before you make that insecticide application, or you will likely be treating twice. So one thing we do in Mississippi, Louisiana, Arkansas is ditch bank surveys, which helps us predict what populations will look like later on in the growing season. So in the spring, we go out with sweep nets and we sweep along roadways, and we're sweeping mainly white and crimson clover because this is a fantastic host for red-banded stink bug development. And we can look at those numbers, and if we're finding a lot of red-banded stink bugs, we can predict that it's probably going to be a heavy year for the pest. And if we're not finding as many, we can assume that we may not see damaging populations until later on in the year. Thanks for watching.